Deadpool and Wolverine came out a few weeks ago, and it was everything I wanted it to be. It was fun, it was touching, it had me burst into tears laughing at certain points, and I screamed at certain cameos that I won't spoil for anyone who still hasn't seen the film yet. And one of the best parts of the film is that, sure, it is a love letter to all the Fox X-Men films, but it actually does push along the overarching multiverse storyline that the MCU has been trying to go for. And yet, out of all the films in Marvel's Phases 4 and 5, aka the Multiverse Saga, it's been kind of lacking. And even with all of the very much needed exposition dumps to explain to the audience what's going on, they added one new variable to the mix: the concept of an anchor being. In short, an anchor being is supposed to be someone of such great importance to a given universe that their world quite literally revolves around them. On a metatextual level, they're the character that's front and center of the films that the audience are there to see. On a storytelling level, it's the character with the most plot importance, and if they're killed or removed, it would literally make that world collapse. Like I said, I'm not going to go too deep into the Deadpool and Wolverine film because, spoilers, but I mean, if you've seen at least one or two of the Fox X-Men films, you can kind of guess who that universe's anchor being is.
But it does rhyme with pulverine.
Which has me thinking, now that this is an established rule for Marvel movies, who exactly would be the anchor being for the main Marvel Cinematic Universe's timeline? The more I think about it, you can make a strong argument for a good number of characters, and until there is a definitive confirmation of who it is, we can at least have fun and go through every single hero and start crossing them off the list. Guess who style? So, let's get into it. I think the character that most people think is the anchor being of the main MCU is the titular character of the very first film to kick off the entire franchise, Tony Stark. He had an entire trilogy of films before any other character got a sequel. He's the biggest box office draw. Robert Downey Jr. was the highest paid actor in the franchise. After the massive success of the films, even the comic book character shifted from being a B-tier character who was just filling out the Avengers roster to becoming a main face of the entirety of Marvel Comics. Iron Man was undoubtedly the most important character in the MCU. The keyword being was. If the MCU was just the Infinity Saga, we could easily pin the anchor being status on him. Except he died in the 22nd film, and now we're on 34. And that's not even including the TV series. Sure, in Deadpool and Wolverine, they even say that it can take about 1,000 years or so after an anchor being dies before the universes completely unravel. Wolverine. It was Wolverine. This is the explanation of how, even though he died in Logan, they still made Deadpool 2, Dark Phoenix, and the New Mutants afterwards. Even though they didn't really explain that this technically isn't the Wolverine from the other films, but don't think about it too hard. And yeah, I will give critics that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has felt like it's gone down in quality ever since Tony died in Endgame. But a slight decline in the MCU versus what happened with the Fox films, I wouldn't put it at the same level. Deadpool 2 was just very much its own thing. But Dark Phoenix and New Mutants just felt directionless, since we knew that the franchise was over the moment it was announced Disney was buying Fox, and all three of those films were just the only ones in the entire Fox franchise to not even include a Hugh Jackman cameo. The MCU's batting average has been lowered, but I wouldn't by any means say that it's aimlessly drifting away into obscurity. Guardians 3 was amazing. No Way Home made almost $2 billion. And Angela Bassett won a Golden Globe and was nominated for an Oscar for her role as Queen Ramonda, a Marvel superhero's mother. The two franchises are not the same. Yet, my biggest argument against Tony being the anchor being is simple. Doctor Strange saw 14 million different possible futures where they could eventually win. You think if it was the one where he saw Iron Man dies and the universe spaghettis into nothing in a few years, that probably would have factored into his decision. Whoever is the anchor being, they're gonna have to still be alive. Because honestly, where do you go with this story? They can't just get a variant of Iron Man, because that's literally the plot of Deadpool and Wolverine. And doing it again sounds like the laziest first draft of how they're gonna shoo in RDJ Doom. So, first person to check off our list of 64 contenders. And if we were to really break it down and start quickly picking off the almost certainly not it heroes, we need to look at other examples of who'd be an anchor being in the MCU on the level of Wolverine was to the Fox X-Men films. We need to look at two other shows with exposition dumps and how multiversal main characters work. In Loki, we know that a new universe is created when a Nexus event happens, and in What If, we know that it is caused when somebody makes a different choice. Like Peggy Carter, undoubtedly the anchor being of her reality, because she was the one that decided to step down with Steve Rogers during the experiment. It was her choice, and she became the most important person in that reality. But it isn't as clean cut as that. Like in the What If episode where T'Challa became Star-Lord. To the audience, he's definitely more important. But that branch in reality came when Yondu decided to send his dumb subordinates to go get Peter Quill instead of doing it himself like he does in the movies. So the fact is that episode revolves around T'Challa, and it's significant to us the fans because it's Chadwick Boseman's final performance. There is an argument to be made that the anchor being of that reality would be Yondu. So it's all going to come down to a balance between the metatextual information that we the audience see and all the in-universe lore that's known between all the characters if we really want to find out who's the most important. So I guess we can just start speed running through all the heroes that we can weed out in a process of elimination. First off, like I said, they can't be dead. So that's a no on Agent Coulson, Black Widow, Gamora, Loki, Jane Foster, Quicksilver, T'Challa, and Vision. Obviously, they need to be from the main Earth 1999-99. Or you can call it Earth 616, whatever. Because it kind of defeats the purpose of an anchor being if it's not actually someone from that universe. So the mutants are out, variants of Loki and Gamora are out, and America Chavez, since she's also a Nexus being, someone who's the only one of them in the entire multiverse. And maybe Clea. And to scratch that metatextual itch, they need to have at least starred in one project. The more, the better. And that's a good chunk right there. Let's all agree that it's more than likely not going to be any of the 10 members of the Eternals or 6 members of the Thunderbolts. I don't feel the need to add 16 more spots on the list when they're immediately going to be taken off anyways. I also left off some names like Kraglin, M'Baku, and Yondu, and a bunch more characters that I'm really sure that aren't going to be the anchor being. Anyone introduced in phases 4 and 5 are immediately gone. A whole franchise basically happened without them, and in lore, if they weren't important enough to be called on to fight in either of the 2 most impactful events in that universe, the fights from Infinity War and Endgame, they're literally less important than Howard the Duck. And finally, this one's going to be a little bit subjective. They also needed to have an impact on the world outside of their immediate domain. So it's impressive that Ant-Man can be an intergalactic, time-traveling conqueror, yet he never really left a lasting impact on the MCU as a whole. And same goes for anyone in the Guardians of the Galaxy who never really came back and stayed on Earth, where most of the MCU takes place. And as much as I love Hawkeye, it will come down to whether or not they've made a universe-defining choice. Sure, he was a founding Avenger, and even starred in his own Disney Plus show, but ultimately, he didn't do anything that could have been done just by him, and only in this universe alone. Seriously, one of my favorite characters in the MCU, he just lacks that main character energy, if you know what I mean. I do need to take Spider-Man off the list. The real-world reason is that I highly doubt Disney would rely so heavily on Spidey and go all out on making him the ultimate main character, since they don't technically own the film rights to him. And story-wise, he has canonically been around since Iron Man 2, and has made many universe-altering decisions, but you gotta take this one up with Sony. Alright, that's technically 82 down to the top 7, the actual contenders. The 2 biggest names that I've seen thrown around are either Doctor Strange or Wanda. Could either of them be the anchor being? No, not at all. And they are both important to the multiverse as a whole, and will absolutely be playing larger roles moving forward, but I don't think it's either of them. They have altered universes, just not their own as much. And neither of them appeared in-universe before Phase 1. And shy of that, Wanda is presumed dead, or maybe in the void, we don't know yet. And Strange was replaced as the Sorcerer Supreme by Wong, so I just don't see this version of Hulk stacking up as the anchor being. And the comics? Absolutely. He is a being that's infinitely powerful and can never die, but his solo films starred a different actor, and he hasn't really achieved that level of importance since. Even though he was the one to make the snap to bring everyone back from being dusted, he didn't fight in the Battle of Endgame, and technically, he didn't fight in Infinity War either. And then everyone in both canon and real life forgot that he was the one that made the first snap because it was immediately overshadowed by Tony's snap, which all that was just to stop Thanos' army. Like, apparently every detail we saw in the films is known to the people of the MCU, but no one talks about how Hulk restored half of all life in the universe. Yet they sure did go wild with the murals and statues of Tony. Captain Marvel would be a solid choice, and has interacted with most of the heroes at one point or another, and she was the inspiration to create the Avengers. But at this point, she is just making this list so far on technicalities. Yes, she has starred in 2 films and appeared in Endgame, and has that cameo at the end of Shang-Chi, and then again at Miss Marvel, which was just a scene from the Marvels, so that's hard to classify if it's a true cameo appearance. And finding the anchor being is starting to turn into this competition show where they could all realistically win, but it all comes down to the very nitty-gritty details that are entirely subjective. And I just don't have that much of a convincing argument for her to be the end-all, be-all, the universe actually does revolve around her anchor being. Captain America, who I would say is the most impactful character on the people of the MCU, his first solo film is still the first chronologically on the Marvel timeline, so he's always going to be seen as the first superhero to that world. And he led every single other hero in the final battle of Endgame. Even outside of his universe, everyone still reveres Captain America. But he doesn't have that steady through line since he retired in Endgame. Technically, Captain America is still alive, yet his story has been told, and that torch has been passed. And it wouldn't make much narrative sense to put all of this work building up the Multiverse Saga just to go back to the drawing board with Cap. And realistically, the entire point of Falcon and Winter Soldier was Sam proving his worth to be the next Captain America. And the upcoming Brave New World is about him finally having that mantle. It undoes so much hard work and investment if they just decide to go back on it all and make Steve Rogers the most important person ever. Is he worthy of the title? Absolutely. But would that make the best story? Next, I'd place Nick Fury, because he actually appeared in the very first MCU film and changed how we, the audience, watch movies. No one was staying throughout the credits until he showed up, and now you're weird if you're the one that leaves. He formed the Avengers, which is surprisingly pretty rare among the multiverse, and that was the rallying point that put together the MCU in our real world. Nick Fury has appeared in more films than any other character outside of the Stan Lee cameos, with him also being the thread that connected Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to the MCU. And he even starred in his own TV series. Just don't look at the Rotten Tomatoes scores for the final episode, or watch the final episode. And story-wise, he has left an impact far greater than any other character has, and he is the glue that bonded the early phases together. And just like Cap, his influence has waned a little bit in phases 4 and 5, but he at least is still there. All that said, I believe it's actually Thor who's the anchor being of the MCU. Everything just points to him being the main character of this universe. He was a founding Avenger, the only character with 4 leading films, with one of them in each of the first 4 phases. He's interacted with nearly every single character in the universe, outside of the newly introduced ones, of course. I mean, his relationship with Loki is what caused the Avengers to assemble in the first place. He gave life to Vision, he's the bridge between all the cosmic space adventures, all the Earth-level stories. He even ties together all the magical side of the MCU, and nobody else even comes close. Even in Love and Thunder, he's one of the few beings to reach the center of it all to meet eternity. If anyone could be the center of the Marvel Universe, it's probably the guy who's actually been there. But the biggest reason I think that he's the anchor being is because unlike most characters introduced that early in the Infinity Saga, he's the only one with a clear story moving forward. Every other original Avenger is either dead or retired. He's just out somewhere being a dad. And if they need him, he could easily slot into any of the crews established or will be established. Back to the Guardians? Sure. For the young Avengers, Love can totally join them, and he'd be the overly protective father. The Midnight Suns could easily take him, considering he's slain more monsters over the last 1,000 years than anyone else on that team. And if the Midnight Suns still don't want him, have him remind everyone that he's still a Viking god by giving him that edge he's been missing. And even the Earth politics stuff could realistically have Thor return. They're hinting at all this political turmoil with New Asgard for several movies, and the President of the US called open season on all aliens, which does include the Asgardians and their safe haven for all the other aliens on Earth. My best guess on how that's all going to play out is if in the Thunderbolts, it's actually going to be based on the Siege storyline, which saw the Dark Avengers go to war with Asgard. That could be how you bring in Hercules, actually. And who would come back as Asgard's defender against all the ungrateful Midgardians? Thor. But every little thing would build up to that final moment, when the eventually fully realized Thor finally meets the fully realized God of Stories Loki at the center of the multiverse. And that'll be the most touching moment in the entirety of the Multiverse Saga. Even more touching than when we finally learn why Thor was crying for Deadpool. But now that I say all this, I don't think Marvel's actually going to say who is the anchor being. Because that's basically admitting that this is the most important character, and you can forget about all the other ones because they're just not as special. But what do you guys think? Who do you believe is the MCU's anchor being? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this week's video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more weekly content on comic books and nerd stuff. I've been Eric, and you've been awesome.